Hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy episode number 89. I'm Stephen Barr.
Hi everyone, I'm Rahul Subramaniam, and I can't believe that we are one short of a 90. We've come a long way.
We need to do a party for episode 100.
Yeah, we're just 11 episodes away. And the rate that we're going at, we're doing roughly 2 episodes a week. That means we should be there in about 5 weeks' time.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. And we have already just so grateful for all the guests and the people who've spent time with us. That's been really neat. Been reviewing some of the older shorts and the clips, and like we're a little cringy, but our guests have been fantastic.
100% agree with that. And I think we should bring up a lot of our guests who have really helped us with the show over the years, and have them all join us at the 100th episode.
That would be cool. That's a great idea.
Yeah, let's do that to celebrate the 100th episode. And the audience, tell us who you want on the show for the 100th episode. We'll have a huge panel. We'll see how many folks we can get to the show, and we would love for them to talk about the stuff that they're working on, to talk about cost optimization and everything AWS. So this should be fun.
All right, we'll have to start planning now to lock in everyone's schedules, but we will do it.
Exactly.
That'll be fun. Well, what have you been working on?
Oh, there have been so many things going on. The RAG stuff is getting very interesting. I'm trying to figure out the most efficient way of putting all the code base into a RAG efficiently. And it is harder than I had imagined to get all the right questions answered from a whole bunch of source code. And these are massive code bases. It's a little bit of a challenge, but it's definitely been a lot of fun. That's taken up most of my time. And the weekend is planned for attempting an upgrade on my Prusa Bear Mark III machine over to Mark IV. So looking forward to it.
Oh, wow. That's going to be great.
Yeah. I will let you know. I don't have hopes for getting it done this weekend, but I will make good progress this weekend.
Fantastic. We've got, we're working on, my two older kids and we're working on an Arduino-based Valentine's Day project. I don't want to reveal what it is yet, but I've got some of the hardware here. There's going to be some 3D printing, some soldering, probably some hot gluing. But we're going to...
that sounds like a lot of fun.
Hopefully have this ready in the next couple of days. I'm not as yet very well versed in embedded programming, but we're starting we're not going to make it too complicated. So I think we'll be able to pull off what we want to do.
So what components are you using? Are you using LEDs? Are you using servos? Or what are the external components you're using?
So we've got, the core of it is going to be an Arduino Mega R3, which can probably be replaced as a Nano once we get everything worked out.
Got it.
It's going to need Wi-Fi, so I've got an 8266.
Okay.
Now,
why not just use the 8266?
I probably could. I think Arduinos are a little bit easier to use.
It's the same. It's the same programming. There's no difference at all.
Okay, so if I could probably get away. You need
to use the same Arduino IDE.
Okay, I can say I need to control 6 buttons, this little screen, and I need to be able to call an API that's running somewhere else on my network.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that with the ESP8266. It's relatively straightforward to do that. And I assume that LED screen is I2C communication. So that's straightforward. And you can use 6 out of the 14 odd GPIO pins that are available on the ESP8266. So just get a Node MCU, which is an ESP8266, and you have 14 GPIO pins available to you. 14 or 16.
That'll be okay. Yeah, that'll be great.
That's plenty to control this.
All right, I think that should be good. We need 6 buttons, or maybe 8 buttons, the screen, Wi-Fi. And then for the 8266, can I power it with an 18650 battery?
You can, but you probably want to add a TP4056 battery charger controller in front of it. It's a very
Okay.
inexpensive, but put that in front of it so that you have discharge protection on the 18650. And then you can charge it using the same device. It's a tiny little chip, really handy, and it solves the purpose.
Cool. I should be able to demo a functioning version of this thing we're building next week, but it's pretty exciting. The other thing I wanted to try eventually was to use embedded Rust to do some of the programming. I know that you can
That's
also.
interesting.
Yeah, it looks. I did a stream with Darko where we were learning Rust for Bedrock, and I'll talk about that one later. But embedded Rust looks kind of neat for Arduino printing, and I think you can also do STM32s, but I think that's another level of complication.
Got it. I have to explore that field. I haven't, but definitely sounds very interesting. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'll see if once I get this done, and then I think with the 8266. So right now it's going to be breadboard based, but if we can get it working in the next week, we'll order a PCB from either JL PCB or PCBWay.
Nice.
And get it cleaned up a bit.
That's a really fun project to actually do the circuits and then generate it and then get it ordered from one of these manufacturers in China. It's really efficient in the way they do it.
Yeah, apparently you can get it like within a couple of days, which is amazing. You can send someone a Gerber file and they could make this circuit and die it and do whatever they do, test it,
Correct.
Put on the SMT components if you have them, and then get it in the mail across the ocean.
Yeah, it takes. I mean, in India, the last time I tried it, they took about a week to 10 days to send it, but that's not bad either. That's pretty good.
Well, let's see if we get this off. Oh, and the other project, this will be next week, and I'm going to make a video of it. So you can see I'm very careful with my angles here. And that's because I've got a beautiful 1980s wood veneer mini bar right next to me. And I think that mini bar is going to meet its end next week. So I've got.
Are you going at it with a hammer, or are you carefully moving it out of there?
Okay, well, I want to keep a tiny little bit of it because there's a sink built in, so I want to keep that. I think that's pretty handy for a glass of water, maybe rinsing out a coffee cup. I want to keep that, but the majority of the mini bar is going to go, and we're going to put. My old desk is going to become the electronics workstation, and then I've got a standing desk to replace the old desk in the other corner, and then I should have more flexibility because, as you can't see right now, to get into the spot, I have to trip over several lights, cables, cameras, and very carefully maneuver into here without tripping over everything. So this will help me clean it up a lot. And then I'll work on that railing project that I described earlier, where I want to have the camera on one of those linear rails. And ideally what I want to do is push a button on the Stream Deck and have all the cameras and lights slide out to their exact right position. And then push another button, have them all retract. That'll be like version 3. Version 2 is version 1 is just get them on the ceiling and mobile. Yeah. And then version 2 is going to have some adjustment.
Makes sense.
And then version 4, it should be able to figure out the light, use AI to calibrate the shot, turn the lights on or off, get the focus. So that's
fun,
the
fun projects.
Yeah, that would be fun. Also, you can see this this view a lot easier. Let's see what else is going on. Oh, it's Super Bowl today, so that'll be awesome. Neat. Yeah. I'm not too invested in the teams, but I enjoy watching the game.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't followed anything around Super Bowls except for the concerts in the middle of it. Those are quite interesting every year.
Well, tune in. I think it's going to be 5 a.m. your time.
No, I'm going to be fast asleep. Okay, it's been a crazy week. I need my sleep, so I will catch it sometime later in the day.
Good. Yeah, I don't think it's worth waking up in the middle of the night for. It could wait until breakfast.
Yeah, and anyway, for us, that football doesn't really feel like football. What you call soccer is football to us, and it's a different game.
It was really fun when we were discussing the streaming tech that was used in the India-Pakistan cricket match.
Yeah, I think they had No, so they had 350 million viewers on a Hotstar, which is Disney's streaming service, at one time. So
That's incredible.
they had 350 subscribers who were logged in and viewing at the same time, one single match on one day. That's the entire population of the US or
This is
more.
so much bandwidth. Many different local zones serving this. Lots of
Correct.
capacity. That's cool. All right. Well,
Yeah.
we have articles to review, some really neat case study to go over, but Graviton, some fun AI announcements. Let's see. Let's just dive right into it. And then first, we have our Finder Fixer announcement at the end of the show. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
We are sticking with our 1 a week cadence, which is it's so exciting, right? Every week there's another way you can save, and they just compound on each other. It's like compound interest. You get one, you get momentum, you do another.
Correct. By the way, the very exciting news is over the last 4 weeks, we have found that customers have an additional 60 to 70% of new savings compared to what they had earlier, just from all of these new finders and fixes. And that is the most exciting part for me. The fact that it's unlocked so much more savings for these customers is really amazing. So we'd love to share that with you a little later. But let's dive right into the article reviews.
Okay, I'll pull up the first article now. Amazon EC2 C6g instances are now available in extra regions. Now, I think this is interesting. I put this here because right now there's this C6g is Graviton 2. We're still rolling out things that are now 2 generations behind.
So this is definitely interesting from two standpoints. Number one is that the C6G is one of the cheapest instances that's available, yet very highly performant. It gives you a 40% better price performance over the Intel or the AMD instances, which is really awesome. So it does make sense to roll out the C6Gs for a large amount of the managed workloads that AWS provides out of the box, as well as for customers to use them for a lot of general purpose workloads. Now, if you want to upgrade to the higher, the C7Gs and the R8Gs, you can do that. But I think this is an easy first step for most customers, and it'll deliver tons of value.
All right, how are you going to review and rate this one?
This is definitely a simplified for customers in those regions, and I would give this a 4.
Awesome. Okay, announcing disruption controls for Karpenter. So Karpenter is the Kubernetes management layer on top of EKS. And with Karpenter, you can control when disruptive changes are made. So say you're upgrading a version of something. Rahul, what do you think of this one?
Okay, so this is definitely interesting. It basically has the concept of disruption budgets that are set up on the node pool that you can then manipulate. It is a little complex for my liking, but for those folks who are running really critical production workloads, I think having disruption budgets on your node pool is incredibly important. So I can see why this is useful to a lot of folks that rely on making sure that all disruptions are controlled. So for just that pool, I would say it simplifies. For the larger AWS community, I would think it makes it more complex. I'm going to give this a 3-star or 3.
What highlights why you want to use this managed services. Managing it yourself is complicated.
It is.
So I think we brought up an interesting point with this Karpenter thing. Is with this disruption budgets, I admit I had to copy and paste some of the documentation into ChatGPT and say, "Can you give me the same thing but simplify it a little bit?" It's complicated to run these big services on your own, and so for things that are written yourself, of course, you kind of have to embrace that complexity. But for things like databases, let Amazon embrace that complexity. And you can embrace the couple cents an hour that needs to for them to manage it.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true. You want to be using managed services as much as possible so that your services are available. But I do think that there are a bunch of scenarios where, for example, we were discussing a little while ago the example of Disney Hotstar, servicing a World Cup match. Now, when you have a scenario like that, and you have evictions. Now, obviously, you can't handle that kind of scale just on, just on EC2 on demand. It's just going to be insanely expensive. You want to use as much of Spot as possible. Your Spot fleet is going to be as broad-based as possible to accommodate all of those instances. And then you're going to have a lot of fluctuation as well. You're going to have tons of underutilization for certain amounts of time, and then you're going to have absolutely peak utilization at other times. So in those scenarios, it absolutely makes sense that whenever you're trying to control, you never want to let go of disruption on more than a fixed number of nodes or a fixed percentage of nodes. And you might want to set certain other ceilings or certain other kinds of constraints on it. And so from that standpoint, the tool makes sense. I, however, feel that for the most part, you should try and avoid it as much as possible. You should keep things as stateless as possible so that a managed service can manage all of this for you. And you shouldn't have, as long as you set the right metrics to measure and the right thresholds at which, scaling up and scaling down is triggered, it should work for the most part. I would prefer if customers did not get into these very nuanced control of your, container management plane. It just feels like too much. Then, I mean, it is way too much control for an average user to have.
Well, it's interesting. I see the analogy with instance selection, that I think that we are almost at peak complexity of manual instance selection. And we're moving into this world where you're going to get compute optimizer, you're going to have tools or spot attribute based instance selection to make that choice for you, and most people won't pick that by themselves.
Correct.
But
I completely agree. So you should use one of the managed platforms or a serverless platform for all of your compute, whether it be Lambda, whether it be ECS Fargate. Pick one that works best for your code base and your workload, and let it manage stuff for you as much as possible. Yes, certain architecture decisions have to be made up front, but once you do that, the rest should be really simple with these.
It's funny when I have friends ask me sometimes, should I use Kubernetes for this project? And my answer is always, you will know when you need to do that, but don't just jump into it. Like I guess it's the opposite example to the cricket match that you mentioned. I've seen tutorials for how to write a personal blog that start with like micro Kubernetes or whatever. Okay, don't do that. Start with a Raspberry Pi, start with Lightsail, start with
correct,
a text file as your database, and then scale up as needed. But you don't have to go for the. Well, I mean, it's part of the engineering mindset. I do like the optimistic mindset of, my personal blog will need Kubernetes for all this huge amount of traffic it's going to get. And I hope that is your problem. But
I don't have that problem with any of my personal blogs. In fact, I try to take one Lightsail instance and pack as much of it as possible, and I pay $5 a month for all of it.
Yeah, that's more than plenty, right? It could probably be served by maybe not an 8266, but definitely a couple of pies.
Absolutely. 100%.
Awesome. Okay, well, that is, if you need this, then it seems like a very good thing. But hopefully you don't need this, or you're planning to not need this in the future.
I completely agree with that.
All right, let's go to the next article. AWS Application Load Balancer announces one-click WAF integrations. So what is a one-click WAF integration, and why is this going to be helpful?
Okay, so WAF is basically Web Application Firewall, right? A lot of times when you've deployed something on the public internet, you're going to start seeing people attack it. And the most common attack is the denial of service attack. And the WAF basically helps you protect public endpoints from those kinds of attacks. It can detect stuff. It can have rules that automatically either deny access and do things like that to protect your application. And that is now available with a single click as part of the integration with the application load balancers. I think this is definitely a big win. It's one of the biggest concerns I have anytime I'm putting out something publicly on the internet, especially API endpoints. And it's a pain to integrate it with WAF, if you have to go to two different places. This just simplifies it tremendously, and I'd give this a 4 cloud.
And this reminds me that security, they say, is principle 0, right?
Yes.
Even before your app, your logic, before everything else, security. And having worked in healthcare, IT, that's number 1, right? You do not ever want to lose people's medical data. So, security is number 1, and then you build on top of that secure foundation. So anything that can help make security easier is a win.
Agree.
Final article. This is AWS Fargate announces a price reduction. Let's cue up the timer. Fargate announces a price reduction for Windows containers on ECS.
Yay!
Awesome. So what do you think? How many people are using Windows containers?
I think there are a lot of folks who use Windows containers for a simple reason that .NET applications are, and there's tons of .NET applications out there. They're way easier to just deploy on Windows containers. Getting them to run on Linux, especially the older versions, incredibly hard. So it absolutely makes sense to run some of those applications on .NET. Correct.
Reduce minimum billing duration to 5 minutes. This looks great. So if you are using .NET-based applications, this is going to be, do you know what the percentage? Up to 49%. That's great.
Correct.
This is another one of those examples where if you use AWS, you will occasionally get these things where you save with no effort. How do you rate this one?
I rate this as a simplified and a 3-star. The only reason I'm holding back on the stars is I feel sorry for those on Windows who don't get the per second billing. This feels like going all the way back to EC2 instances in the early 2009, 2010 timeframe, when we still had hourly billing on EC2 instances. I feel like the Windows users are still suffering that same fate, and they're not gaining the most out of their per second billing.
Per second billing is great. Do you remember initially, right? It was if you went 1 second over, you bought the next hour.
Correct, and that just be painful. Every time you'd say, we used to look at our hourly utilization, especially for the last hour. It would be so frequent that you would use only about 5 minutes of the entire hour. And the rest of the time is just completely wasted, or you get billed for it irrespective. And so per second billing was a big game changer for us when that came out, and it cut costs significantly. So I'm hoping that this starts doing that for Windows users.
Yeah, definitely. That will be a win when they have that. But that 49%, up to 49% price reduction, that seems great. And to have that just show up with no effort, that's a nice bonus.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's our articles for this week. It wasn't a very busy week with what's new announcements, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was relatively slow. I don't know if our reviews hit the blogs team and they felt like they needed to close up some of the stuff before they published it again. I think last week was probably one of the hardest weeks from a review standpoint. This week, the volume is lower, but the quality has definitely gone up. So I'm hopeful for next week.
Yeah, certainly. We will keep an eye out. We will give you the latest. I think that's great. All right. Well, we do have a really neat case study that came out that I'm going to put this on the screen. 1 second here. I'll put this on the screen. This is Encord, and they have done a high-performance compute cluster with Graviton. So let's have a look. All right. Make this a bit wider. Encord Technologies built an HPC for AWS, weather, research, and forecasting. We'll have the link in the description. I really like how they outlined where they started, what their requirements were. And okay, here's a quote from their EVP. Nobody was sure if building the same system in an on-prem environment can give us the performance we want. Uncertainty prevents us from adopting the system in the first place, but AWS removed that uncertainty for us. So I could see that procurement's team, what if they buy all this hardware, they wait a few months for it to show up possibly, and then they install it and it's not good enough. Well, what do they do at that point?
Correct. And don't forget the fact that whenever there's procurement that does this, you basically absolutely have to overestimate your utilization so that you have enough capacity that you need for a few years, not just for right now. So there's tons of waste that happens on that front.
Yeah, and what if you go with a technology and then the technology goes in a different direction? Like, do you remember the Intel Phi accelerator cards?
This thing was in some of the fastest supercomputers in the world like 8 years ago. And now they're on eBay for cheap because no one knows how to use them because they're so darn hard to find support for.
Yes.
There's a lot of those still in HPC clusters, right? And they stopped making those. It didn't really work out.
Exactly.
All right. Well, what I like about this one, so they started with a Graviton-based cluster, and they started with a Graviton 2, right? So they started with the HPC 6A, and that's okay. Here's the initial environment with the HPC 6A, which is an AMD HPC instance.
Yeah.
And then they use parallel cluster. So that was really neat. So they built this, they were able to prove out an architecture, and then once they had all the other things they had to do set up, right, it's test out their applications, make sure, build up their AWS certainty, then they were able to switch to the HPC 7G. So that's the Graviton 3E processor for high performance computing for weather simulations.
Correct. So the general guidance from AWS is that if you're on x86 Intel, switch over to ARM and you'll save somewhere between 10 and 20% for HPE workloads. And if you're on x86 on ARM, then you'd save another 40-50% by switching over to the Graviton-based compute behind it. Now, that said, I was having a very interesting conversation yesterday with an account manager from AWS who manages a whole lot of customers just dealing with HPE workloads. And one of the insights that came was for a lot of those customers, the recommendations of the compute optimizer don't really work when it comes to HPE. So I am going to be very, very curious to hear from Rick on the AWS Compute Optimizer team about why and what the disconnect is between the recommendations that Compute Optimizer is making, specifically around HPE workloads.
Yeah, we will have to catch up with Rick. That'll be part of our conversation. We will have him towards the end of the month. I just caught up with him a few days ago, and we're going to get that booked in.
Perfect. Yeah. So we will get you the answer to that particular question. Our hope is that the Compute Optimizer is your one-stop shop for all recommendations around EC2 right sizing and EC2 instance picking, because it understands your workloads better than anything else. It is AWS native and it's an AWS recommendation, so you should be able to trust it. And as Rick has said multiple times on the show, Compute Optimizer is very conservative. And maybe that is the reason why it doesn't have the most aggressive, cost optimization recommendations. But the Compute Optimizer is very conservative.
I guess with HPC, right, you can plan and exactly how much memory you have for every instance, and you can have these fixed size arrays that are perfectly sized for your memory layout and and your registers and all that sort of thing. So I wonder if that's a good point. Maybe Compute Optimizer is being too conservative and not wanting to go right to that physical limit of the machine, because in HPC you don't want any, what's that word? You probably don't want any headroom, because you're not going to get any surprise requests of a weather forecast that you weren't planning on.
Yeah, that's probably true. So again, I don't understand the details to that much of an extent. Like I would love to learn more. So having Rick on the show explain, why they disconnect and what is a better alternative would be really neat. But in the meantime, I think unanimously I'm hearing from anyone who's been running HPC workloads on Graviton that it's a game changer for them. They're saving anywhere from 50 to 60% across the board as they switch over to Graviton for their workloads. It is a little bit of work, but it's way simpler than switching over to Graviton for workloads where everything is subject to big variations in consumption. HPC workloads are very, very controlled environments. They're very controlled workloads. And so you can be very sure about what you're testing, how you're testing it, and how it's going to execute. There should be very few surprises. So those are ideal candidates to switch over to Graviton for becoming very, very cost efficient.
What I think is neat about this one is I was kind of thinking about, everything in this world seems to be more complicated than you initially give it credit for. And I think as kind of end user consumers of the weather forecast, right, for us, it's, do you grab a sweater or not on your way out the door? Is it going to be a nice day? Are we going to be outside or inside today? Can I go on a run now, or should I wait till later when it's not rainy? That's the extent of how I use the weather forecast. and appreciating, okay, if you were doing a power generation for solar and wind, and whether there's going to be sufficient sunshine means should we fire up the coal plant or the gas plant in order to have a sufficient amount of capacity, you could really appreciate the complexity that goes into all this long-term planning to make infrastructure work. And then another consumer of long-term weather forecasting would be like agriculture, right? Do you plant this very lucrative crop that requires perfect conditions, or do you buy the more robust one that isn't as lucrative because there's less certainty about say temperature or rain this year? So do you buy the more robust but not as tasty variety, or do you go for the really big fancy one that needs more optimum conditions? These are all big questions.
I think in general, the conclusion over here is you've got storage now, which is beautifully integrated into these HPC workloads. These new advancements in storage, whether it be FSx for Lustre or the new S3 capabilities around throughput and availability, they have increased tremendously. So it just makes sense to use AWS to do all of these at very, very high bandwidth and high throughput that is now available to these instances. And then switch over to Graviton to be extremely cost efficient.
And it's looking at some of the specifics here. So it says that they do 4 calculations per day, with each calculation taking up to 2 hours on a cluster of between 500 to a maximum of 4,000 cores daily, generating 500 gigabytes of output every day.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about that, so at their maximum, well, the difference between their maximum and their minimum usage is, okay, well, I guess at their minimum, it would be 500 times 8, right? So 4,000 core hours.
Yeah.
So, whereas their maximum, it's going to be more like 16,000 core hours. But
Correct.
if they had to do this on-prem, they would have to over-provision to 5,000 cores that they would be paying for 24 hours a day. Whereas
Correct.
here, even at their max, they're still only using it 8 hours a day.
Correct.
And this is their core product. Right? As you can see, even if this is what you're doing 100% of profession, there's just more that has to be done than calculation, right? There's very few users of HPC who can literally have a job running 24/7.
Correct. Yeah, these are usually sporadic jobs, 1 or 2 times a day or 5 times a day. And it's predictable. That's the most important aspect of it. The workload is predictable, and when and how much of the calculation you have to run on how much data, that is predictable too. So, like I said, it's a very controlled environment that you can use to optimize in a much more safe manner than most applications that could have all kinds of variability in their usage, access, and performance.
All right. Well, this was a really neat segment. Have a look at this one. We'll have the link in the description, but it's a great usage of the Graviton 3E, the HP Graviton. Well, there's some fun announcements coming up. I'm going to pull up this one. There is a Party Rock hackathon that's just getting started. So if you are using Party Rock, or if you want to start using Party Rock, this is how you can get motivated. Let's put this up on the screen. Here we go. Share screen. Party Rock Generative AI Hackathon at Amazon Bedrock Playground. Rahul, have you been using Party Rock?
I used it initially, but I have since moved to actually using the lower level API a lot more, because like I've described before, I use a lot of RAGs. I use a lot of, very specific prompting and a very specific way of dealing with all the data in there, which Party Rock is not great at handling with high fidelity, but it's amazing for someone who's a newbie, who's getting started, where you have a use case and you want to build out a quick app that you can, share with others, that you can start using immediately. The ramp for Party Rock is incredibly low. So you could be an absolute newbie and you could build your app in a matter of 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's really, really, really makes it really easy to get started, and you can see that path forward, right? Sometimes when you see these tutorials and the ramp up is 1,000 steps, right? like saying earlier, startup. If you want to do a blog, okay, launch a micro Kubernetes cluster with Postgres. Do all this, you just want to write a blog.
Yeah.
And so that's where things like Medium or Hashnode, right? You just start typing in Markdown, and it takes care of it. Party Rock, you can make an application. You have multiple inputs. You can combine multiple models. You could do a lot with very little startup.
Correct. The way, if you want to get tips on getting started, check out Victoria Simon's LinkedIn posts. She has tons of examples. I see her posting almost every week about one new application that she created. And I think the last one was an application that helps you learn to get AWS certified. And so go check out the examples that she's been posting, check out how she's been implementing the Party Rock applications. It will give you some really neat insights to get started.
So first place, $20,000, second place, $10,000, third place, $5,000, and lots of other prizes there. So that's pretty useful. And it's really easy to burn right through these, especially if you're using something like SageMaker Canvas. But this will really help in the machine learning journey for people, make that more affordable. And it's pretty cool. You could do that. Actually, what I want to do a Party Rock app for, just as a simple one, is writing captions for the YouTube shorts. Because I've tried to do a full automation of that, but it's really hard to get that right. I mean, what we cover is very detail oriented, very nuanced. And so being able to have a very simple interactive platform where you can have the context, right? You can have the transcript of the whole episode. You can have the context very easily, and then supplement it just a little bit and adjust it just a little bit. I think that's the sweet spot where Party Rock could really help you. Where
completely agree.
It needs to be interactive anyway. I would love to have this be a completely hands-off automated pipeline, but it's not there yet. Well, you wouldn't like the output. It'd be a bit confusing.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually, but yeah, go check out some of these posts. Some of the apps are really, really interesting. And yeah, we'd love to see what everyone comes up with.
All right, so let's check out the next announcement. This is a bit more serious, but still AI. Amazon has joined the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Safety Institute to advance responsible AI. Put that on screen. And this is a big topic that lots of people are talking about, is what does AI safety look like, right? Do we put AI in charge of, I don't know, IV machines or in charge of weapon systems, right? Are we there yet? And what is that going to look like? And what guardrails and policies need to be in place in order to have AIs that can initiate actions?
Yeah, and the thing that confuses me about this is when it comes to the most sensitive and the most important areas, invariably they are the most highly confidential anyway. So even if you deployed one, who takes responsibility? How do you find out about such scenarios? How do you control it? How do you regulate it? Because nothing is out in the open domain anyway. So it's just the practicality of it baffles me right now, but I'd love to learn more. I'm excited that there's at least there's some understanding between all the big players that safety is essential and they need to participate. Just practically implementing them in the backdrop of making sure that you're keeping pace with all the developments in AI and rolling out products that that have a good product market fit. That is the key. I mean, I'll give you a simple example. The original paper on transformers actually came out of Google, but they spent forever trying to figure out how to make it safe. And during that time, when they hadn't even publicly released anything in terms of a product, OpenAI went ahead and just said, no, we're just doing it. And they put out ChatGPT, right? It wasn't the most secure. It would still allow you to do a bunch of things that you would consider unsafe. But they put it out first, and they had the first mover advantage when it came to something like this. When you've set that precedence, what do you think the big players are going to do the next time something new and shiny is going to be created? Are they going to take all their sweet time to make sure it is absolutely safe based on the workings of this responsible AI group? Or are they going to put it out in the market to get a first mover advantage?
Yeah, and then I share your concerns. I think sometimes what I worry about is that, I think safety in general is a useful concern, but I think that if we just start inventing rules without understanding exactly what it is, or the landscape could shift so quickly that those rules aren't relevant anyway.
Yeah. I'll give you a simple example. Like the Minister of Road Transport in India publicly declared 2 or 3 weeks ago that they are banning any self-driving cars in India, or AI that drives self-driving. They're going to ban it with immediate effect, and it's not going to come in here. Now that seems, that seems unfair, not really thought through, and an example that will absolutely stifle innovation in this part of the world, right? And I don't know if that's the right move. Again, like I said, I don't know if that's the right move. Should the regulation have been any different? Should it have been treated differently? But to outright say that it is banned doesn't feel like the best answer.
Yeah, and I think we have different standards for AI, right? AI
Yeah.
could obviously pass a driver's license exam, right? Self-driving cars could obviously pass that and far exceed that. But then we say, okay, they have to be 100% perfect, whereas 99.999 would be a far better improvement over what exists now. But you surrender that feeling of control and understanding, and it's easy to think about, I don't know, malicious corner cases that could be tucked away in that self-driving LLM that no one knows about.
But not only that, like I said, our tolerance for AI being wrong is way lower than it is for humans being wrong.
All right. Well, it's also Valentine's Day. Is Valentine's Day in India too?
It is, but I think for the most part, people treat it as one big commercial exercise. I think in schools, when we were kids, it was still bigger than now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't seem like a big deal anymore.
Interesting. Well, the Arduino project we talk about, that's our Valentine's Day project, which is going to be useful. It's not just an excuse to play with Arduino. I think it's going to serve a really neat purpose. How are you going to use generative AI for a better Valentine's Day?
I think it would definitely help most folks be more or have more sophisticated communication as they express their feelings. You could have generative AI do poems. You could have generative AI make a song. You could have generative AI, create a beautiful card. And you could be a lot more articulate and sophisticated about what you want to really express versus spending agonizing days and weeks planning for just the right words to go into one of those cards or songs.
Yep. Now make sure you don't just copy and paste it from ChatGPT.
Read it.
Valentine's Day card. Read it. Double check. Make sure this is a supervised learning issue, or you might it might backfire. So,
correct.
I've seen college professors who say like, the prompt is still there. It says, as an AI model, I cannot do this, and you wrote it in your essay.
Right.
So don't copy and paste the poem without reading it first and making sure that it's what you want to say. No, you want to use it as a supplement, not a replacement.
Agree 100%.
I want to try and we could make some nice art. One of my friends, he suggested using it to plan a date. That is all of the, planning a date. And you could use something like Perplexity where it has new information, maybe on, new things in the city that you don't know about. If you in the audience, if you found a really neat use for generative AI for your Valentine's Day, let us know.
We'd love to hear.
How was it received? Did it go well? Did it flop? Did you include your prompt in your Valentine's Day card?
That would make for a fun reel that we could do later.
As a generative AI model, I do not have the context to comment on your relationship, but here's some general platitudes that might be nice. Yeah, I don't think that will go over well.
Definitely not.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we're back, we're going to go over a different AI article about will there be programmers in 5 years. All right, we are back from the break. Here's an article I saw on Twitter that was referenced on Twitter. It's on Medium. We'll post the link in the description. Stability AI, the CEO, he said that there will be no human programmers in 5 years. AI-generated code is already responsible for 41% of the code on GitHub. Now, what is your take on this role? And as your CTO hat, what do you see this? Do you see this as true, not true, over optimistic, under optimistic?
I think it's on the cusp of being over optimistic. And here's my thought. I think we've for the longest time talked about the 10x developer, where there are some developers who do their work so well and so efficiently that they are 10x better than most other developers. I think what AI allows you to do is have a much larger pool of 100x or 1000x developer. I have still not seen a situation where there is no need for any human involvement at all when it comes to AI. I think AI in the hands of someone really good and knowing what they want is an incredible tool. It can produce people who are 1000x more productive. But you need that one person to actually know what they want and to be able to articulate what they want in the right way, so that generative AI is deliberate and accurate in what it is producing. Like even today, when you look at the prompts that really work, they've got to be prompts that are very well articulated. Typically, the domain expertise is baked into the prompt because you need to know exactly what to ask and how to ask about it. I don't think a non-domain expert would be capable of articulating the requirements in a way where the LLM is going to produce awesome results. It's the whole reason why we created programming languages, because you could not articulate instructions crisply enough. We aren't very good at it. And in English, it's way worse.
Yeah, I think that programming is going to look like advanced chess. So the idea of advanced chess is that you can use whatever computer aids you want to. You can have a computer that's giving you moves, feeding you strategies, and the human player is the ultimate synthesizer of information, context, long-term strategy, guiding the whole machine forward. And if you're doing that, you can leverage the best of both worlds, right? Where the computer can be doing massive simulations, alerting you to things that you haven't thought of, maybe alerting you to your own biases in the case of chess. Okay, you're going to fall for this trap. Whereas, but the human can also be taking in context that the AI cannot possibly. The human AI hybrid is going to be a lot more productive.
Yes. It reminds me of I don't know whether you've read this book called Eat, Shoots, and Leaves.
Yes. I like you're highlighting the ambiguity of English.
I mean, a simple punctuation can change the meaning of an entire sentence. And again, it will depend on the human's ability to articulate crisply and clearly the needs and the requirements. And that basically becomes a domain expert.
Well, and I've seen situations where, like in a gaming, if you tell the AI, okay, maximize your percentage of wins, it might win the first time and then resign every other match because it'll never do better than 100%. And
exactly
every match after that is a risk to that perfect score, right? Correct. So you have to say, no, I actually want to maximize. You have to account for these strange corner cases, and those are the ones that you can think of. And what I'm excited about is using AI agents. So as you're working, you can have one AI that's helping you with the code that you're working on right then. You can have another one saying, what's the next question that I'm going to think of, right? Anticipate my next question, put it up on my screen to the right. The other one is, what's an alternative way of doing this? Put it up on my screen to the left. For every function I ask for, give me a different implementation using a different library.
Correct.
Or are these libraries check it on GitHub and see if it's active or well utilized. I don't want to pull in some dependency that's not used, right? And you can use synthesis and AI agents to help you do all these things that you want to do anyway.
Correct.
But
that's exactly the thing that a human needs to do. A human needs to articulate that and automate it. But like I said, you could absolutely get a 1000x developer.
I was thinking about this in the context of Star Trek, because in Star Trek, a lot of the officers said, okay, they programmed the holodeck or they programmed the torpedo. I don't think they were writing code, as much as I like to think they fired up the Emacs version 97 and wrote code by hand. I think when they say programming, right, they're talking about gave their torpedo the intention of doing a certain thing, and whatever abstractions have been developed by the 23rd century probably are not, creating variables and making new classes and calling methods.
Yeah, I completely agree with. So I think that's a great example. Yeah, you don't see them doing all of that, right? They use the tools in the right way, but what questions to ask? And so the role of that Uber developer is going to be different. It is going to be to interact with the AI to produce outcomes, right? Versus being hands on the keyboard, actually typing out code. I completely agree that that's going to go down to zero. But to be able to articulate what you want, the way you want the architecture laid out, the way you want the classes to be laid out, the way you believe is the right abstractions to create in the application. Those are all decisions that this person has to make, and they can get the AI to execute all of that for them.
And also, it's kind of like the ultimate customization of your workflow, because it's different for different people. And so being able to really learn how LLM agents work and being able to set up your development in a way that takes advantage of that and saying, okay, where does my mind wander when I'm doing this, and have an agent that anticipates that for you because you've programmed it and then helps you. I think that's where that's going to be going.
Completely.
All right. So there'll probably still be programmers 5 years from now. It might look different. And in 50 years from now, we'll probably still use the word programming, but it might have a very different, it would look extremely different in terms of what they're actually doing. Maybe not editing text files and running a compiler any more than we are running around with punch cards right now. What do you, as an audience, what do you think of this article? What do you think there's going to be programmers 5 years? I think of also that Bill Gates quote where it says we overestimate what could happen in 1 year, but drastically underestimate what's going to happen in 10 years. Maybe in 10 years, we will just think it and it'll be, and we'll all have Neuralink chips inside. So we'll see.
Exciting future ahead.
Check for episode 1000, where we will be covering the Neuralink AWS integration. All right. Well, let's see. Oh, other thing that was fun. Darko and I, speaking of AI, we tried to use Bedrock from Rust. Have you used Rust yet?
I haven't. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I haven't had a chance to use Rust myself.
So I used to do a lot of Haskell work, which was a lot of fun, but it's very academic. It's pure functional.
Right.
It's fun, but it's hard. The community is very small, whereas Rust seems to have taken a lot of the Haskell learnings and made it usable in production at wide scale. The tooling's really good. You feel like you have all these strongly typed guarantees. But then we dug into the Rust documentation. There's a lot to be desired. I'll put that up on screen. But you look at the invoke model method, and there's nothing there. You really have to know Bedrock fairly well in order to get this to work. But we struggled through, and by about 90 minutes in, we had something which could call Bedrock. And my idea, I think we'll work on it for next time, is to have a Rust program that teaches me Rust. So we're trying to bootstrap calling Bedrock, and then I can have a feedback loop where I call Bedrock and say, okay, here's a program, here's a function that I want to add to this program. Give me the syntax in Rust, and see if I could have a virtuous cycle of Rust development using Bedrock.
Is Bedrock trained on Rust code? Like, can it generate a good function call or
I'm not at the point where I can say what's a good function. But Rust has been around for a while, and there's a lot of Rust code out there in the wild. It's not like okay, well, it's not like Lisp, right? This is my paradigms of artificial intelligence in Lisp book. Lisp is awful for generative AI because every Lisper does it in their own way. It's pretty hard to figure out what a snippet of Lisp is doing without having the broader context, and there's so much global state that can be different.
Correct.
So yeah, Lisp code is really hard for generative AI. Rust is the exact opposite. There is, it's inspired by functional languages, so functions are much more idempotent and self-contained. So it's a lot easier to reason about a snippet of Lisp code. All right, we have our final segment is our new Finder Fixer. So this week is the RDS MySQL retyping to Graviton. We said in the beginning of the show, we're very excited about Graviton and this Finder Fixer, the RDS optimized MySQL instances. With this announcement, we are including Gravitons in this Finder Fixer. So we have an existing Finder Fixer, which will help you optimize your MySQL instance choices. And with this announcement, we are adding Gravitons to the mix.
Correct. And we already had one for Gravitons for Aurora RDS. So if you were already on Aurora RDS, there was a very simple way to get onto Graviton. This extends it to the rest of the RDS ecosystem.
Yeah, and then there's really neat details in this. So if you are on a burstable instance, it will recommend the T4G. So it will respect that burstable. Because if you selected that, you selected it for a reason. We want to respect that choice. And it will suggest a retype to Graviton without resizing. And so we said, why do you want to do it without resizing, right? And the way I like to view it, and I'll put this on the screen, it's almost like a dance. And I'm referencing it this way because in Seattle, we have this great art where we've got these little brass feet embedded into or bronze footprints embedded into the sidewalk, and they're numbered. And so it shows you where to put your feet at different points in time in order to get this dance. And I like to think about that when I'm thinking about this optimization pathway. So say you have a MySQL instance, and it's the wrong size, and it's on, say, Intel. Well, step one, you can move it to Graviton. That's going to change the performance characteristics. It's going to save you. And then step two, you can let that run for a week, 2 weeks. Compute Optimizer will gather some data. And then another step of that dance will come up where it's now the resizing recommendation. So there's multi-steps. And so what I like about these Finder Fixers is that they're synergistic with each other. You do one step, and then you can do another step. And then another step after the resizing, maybe it's in parallel, maybe it's before, maybe it's after, is then looking at the generation. So right now we'll switch to a Graviton 2, but then the Graviton 3 would be the next step in the dance for even more price performance improvement.
Yeah, so this one is actually a really big announcement. Like I said before, there are a ton of users still using RDS with MySQL running on it. And so this is a super simple way of getting switched over to Graviton so that you can start getting all those massive cost benefits. And in most of the cases that we've seen, these cost benefits vary anywhere from 30 to 60%. So there's tons of benefit to be had by switching over to Graviton. If you're not doing that, or if you haven't done it already, please go try out this simple Finder Fixer that we have in CloudFix.
Yeah, go check it out. Have an idea of what the savings look like. And again, if you are not on CloudFix already, you can sign up for a free savings assessment. The link is in the description of the video. Sign up for a free savings assessment. We can scan everything, and you can see, okay, how much is on the table with each one, and check out the RDS optimized MySQL instances. I have that on the screen so you can see where to click in the CloudFix interface to see that. And if you are a customer and a user of CloudFix already, just make sure to check this out. We're adding new things every week. So have a look at your MySQL optimized Finder Fixers. You're going to see the Graviton choices now being populated in there, so you can see how much you can save with that. It is great. We love the Graviton, and more than that, we love choice, right? There's having this great amount of choices to instance sizes, to instance types, to AMD, to Graviton. All of these choices make you have more potential to save depending on your workload. And then plus with the great work from the CloudFix team and also Compute Optimizer, we can really hone down these recommendations, these selections to the right choice.
I completely agree. So if you haven't checked out CloudFix yet, please do so. It's an absolute no-brainer because it's absolutely free to onboard, scan your accounts, and look at where your savings are. So please go check it out, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, let us know. Reach out to Rahul or myself or anyone on the CloudFix team. We'll help you get started and see what you can save. It's I like that. It's a no-brainer, right? This is
correct.
And if you need that budget for machine learning, for generative AI, what better way to do that than to get your MySQL instances to be the right size, turn on those S3 intelligent tiering, get your EBS volumes to GP3, all those little things, but they add up at scale. Even Elastic IP addresses, right? They add up at scale.
Completely agree. Okay, with that, I think this has been an amazing show. We've covered so many different topics. Once again, thanks everyone for joining in today. And if you're watching a recording, thank you for doing that as well. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your comments. Please like and subscribe. We're going to be bringing you new announcements and new finders and fixers every single week. So stay tuned.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.